movie, one of my favorites of all time. As the McAllister family walked out the front door for their family vacation, Kevin was asleep and completely unprepared. Our theme, our title for this evening's message is Motion Has Been Detected. Motion has been detected. Any one of you have a Ring camera or some type of security doorbell system? Have you ever seen that notification pop up on your phone? A motion has been detected. Maybe a Ring camera would have helped Kevin McAllister and his family. That way they could have realized much sooner that they had left the poor boy behind. Maybe they could have been aware of any unexpected motions at their doors. In many ways, God also observes our motions. God is watching Earth's motion while we await His return. Will His people be prepared to receive Him, or will they be unprepared? Well, this evening we're studying in the book of Matthew, chapter 25. If you've noticed, this entire week we've been going through different biblical stories in chronological order. And now we're all the way into the Gospels. The disciples wanted to be ready for their Savior's second coming. So we jump to the book of Matthew, now towards the end of Jesus' ministry. Christ was sitting on the Mount of Olives, and His closest followers came to Him to understand and ask questions about the signs of His soon return and of the end of the age. And in chapter 25, where we're reading this evening, we find one of His parables, a representative story that helps illustrate a deeper point. So we're in Matthew 25, starting at verse 1. Verses will be on screen, and if you have your Bible, you're welcome to follow along that way as well. Matthew 25:1. Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 bridesmaids who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. Verse 3 and 4. The 5 who were foolish didn't take enough olive oil for their lamps, but the other 5 were wise enough to take along extra oil. Now there's an important note I want to make this evening about this parable. It's important for us to realize that the 10 women in this text represent all of those who profess their faith in Jesus. Jesus was not saying that half of the women were Christian believers and the other half were unbelievers. Rather, they were all expecting a wedding to take place. They were all expecting the soon coming of Jesus, yet among them, half were wise and the other half were unwise or foolish. Why is that? Well, Jesus said, because they had neglected to prepare. They were unprepared while awaiting the groom. So verse 5 tells us, when the bridegroom was delayed, they all became drowsy and fell asleep. Anybody here take a nap today? Not a lot of people. I see a few. They all became drowsy and fell asleep. And verse 6 tells us, at midnight, the notification came through. A motion had been detected at the front door. They were roused by the shout, look, the bridegroom is coming. Come out and meet him. Verse 7, all of the bridesmaids got up and prepared their lamps. Verse 8, then the 5 foolish ones asked the others, please give us some of your oil because our lamps are going out. Verse 9, the others replied, we don't have enough for all of us. Go to a shop and buy some for yourselves. It's really interesting how the Greek is written in this verse. When the wise women respond to the foolish ones, their wording was not harsh. The wise bridesmaids were answering politely. That's how the Greek structure presents it. They were essentially saying, we're afraid there's not enough for all of us. So go and buy some. Verse 10 then says, but while they were gone to buy oil, the bridegroom came. Then those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was locked. And the door was locked. Later, when the other 5 bridesmaids returned, they stood outside saying, Lord, Lord, open the door for us. But he called back, believe me, I don't know you. So here Jesus closes the parable and now speaks directly to his disciples. Verse 13. So you too must keep watch, for you do not know the day or hour of my return. Throughout the scriptures, God's church is often referred to as a bride. And our relationship to him is likened to that of a marriage. The nature of weddings carry profound theological significance. Now, I want to talk a little bit about that this evening. Here's a photo from my wedding in 2022. When my wife and I got married, I was so nervous. I was sweating. It was a hot summer day in Miami, in my wife's hometown, and I was wearing all black, as you can see, but I was feeling fly. So, even though I was nervous and sweaty, I was in a very, very good mood that day. But wedding planning takes a lot of work. How many of you have ever planned a wedding before? I see some hands. If you have done this before, you know how stressful it can be. To get to that day that is on screen, it was almost a year's worth of preparation. I'll start off by mentioning the first part about planning a wedding is finding someone to marry. So I remember my wife and I, we had been dating for about 3 years at that point when I felt like, it's time for me to propose. I wanted to graduate from college first, get my money right, and then propose to her. And that's sort of the plan that I took. I remember before the proposal, I wanted to ask her parents' blessing. And I knew that asking somebody's parents for a blessing like that can't be done over text, can't be done over the phone. And so I planned a secret trip to Florida. My wife was living in South Carolina. She was my girlfriend at the time. I was living in North Carolina, and her parents out in Florida. And I remember planning this trip to see and meet her parents down south. It was really difficult to keep that information from Carolina because when we were dating, we were on FaceTime every single day. Shout out to long distance relationships. If you know, you know. I didn't know how I was going to keep that from her, that I was literally visiting her mom and dad and staying at their home at least one night to ask for their blessing so that then I could propose to her. One evening, I remember being in Miami after speaking to her parents, and she called me on FaceTime. I said, what am I going to do? So I told her mom and dad, can you guys drop me off like at a restaurant or at a Panera or at a Starbucks so I can sit in a corner, not give her any hints as to where I'm at, but just be able to have a regular phone call with her? And they're like, sure, we'll help you with that. Thank God they like me. So I remember sitting in a Panera Bread on FaceTime with Carolina, and she's asking me, how was your day? What have you been up to? And it was so difficult for me to tell her, I just asked your mom and dad if I'm allowed to ask if I can marry you. And they said yes. But obviously I didn't tell her any of this. We're just on FaceTime. I'm being all cute and flirtatious or whatever. And the phone call ended. Stayed at her parents' house that evening. Went back home to Charlotte with their blessing. That took a lot of preparation. Finally, a few months later, I proposed to her, and she said yes. Once she said yes, then came some more hard work. Wedding prep. We had to find the venue. We had to find the vendors, photographers, videographers, find the minister to officiate. Then we also had to do the invitations. That was really difficult. Sending out all those invites because you want to invite so many people, yet it's so expensive to invite so many people. That was a process that took a lot of prep. In the meantime, I was also looking for a place for us to live once we got married and could move in together. I probably toured every apartment complex in and around Charlotte for months. It was so stressful. It took so much preparation. How about planning the honeymoon that we would eventually go on? Here's a picture of us smiling once we were at our honeymoon, but I remember as I planned that honeymoon feeling so stressed and concerned, and for some reason Jessie ain't got no neck in that picture. What happened to her neck? I never noticed that. There were so many details to plan. So much preparation to be made. Yet the most important thing I needed to prepare for was being a husband. If my heart was not ready for the marital commitment, none of that other stuff would have mattered. So how do you prepare for a wedding? How did we actually prepare? It wasn't the venue searching and the honeymoon planning. It was about a genuine relationship and getting to know each other according to God's leading. We said that Kevin McAllister in Home Alone was unprepared. Half of the bridesmaids were unprepared. The question is, are you prepared to meet God at the altar today? When it comes to our spiritual lives, the most important for you and I to prepare is by being known by Jesus before he comes again. If we profess our faith outwardly, but our heart isn't totally committed or known by him, none of that other stuff matters. I believe Jesus is coming again. Do you? Amen. I believe he's coming soon. And Revelation, our theme text, points to it. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and dine with him, and he with me. Is your heart ready to welcome Jesus in? Is your heart prepared to live a life of total commitment to him? Imagine if you found out Jesus was going to your house tonight. Imagine he was going to stop by and visit you personally in your home, knock at your door, and ask to dine with you. What would you do to prep for dinner with Jesus? If it were me, I'd immediately start cleaning. I'm kind of a neat freak. I love to be organized and put things in order. And if I found out Jesus were coming, I'd do everything I can to make sure my house was spotless. And in many ways, when we think about welcoming Jesus into our hearts, we think we have to make ourselves spotless before welcoming him in. And so imagine Jesus coming over to your home this evening and you recognizing that there's a mess. So you decide to hide all of your mess in a closet, stuff it to the very top of its ceiling, slam the door shut, and pray it doesn't burst open and expose all of your dirtiness. That's just not going to work. When it comes to welcoming Jesus into our hearts, the key is not to hide our mess, but to let Jesus cleanse us from our mess. When Jesus says he desires to come in and dine with you, it means he desires to change you. Because when you dine with someone, you get to know them. Their influence starts to rub off on you. When Jesus steps into your heart, his character transforms yours. his life becomes to impact yours. And so tonight, I want to ask you, are you prepared to welcome Jesus? You don't have to be perfect to welcome him in. You just have to be willing to commit. Will you raise your hand if you're willing to let Jesus into your heart this evening? I want to give you the opportunity to have some discussion with your neighbors and with those who are around you. There's 3 questions on screen. You don't have to talk about all of them. You can pick whichever one resonates with you. Here's the questions. What does it practically look like for a young person to be spiritually prepared for Jesus' return? Here's another question you can talk about. In the parable of the 10 bridesmaids, what do you think the oil represents in a person's everyday life? And number 3, share about a time in life when you felt awake and spiritually close to God. What helped you stay connected? Feel free to pick any one of those 3 questions. Talk to 2 or 3 people around you. I'll give you a few minutes to discuss. Then you'll start hearing the music for our closing song. So feel free. The time is now yours.